Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5, our final episode of our 5-part series on the hero's journey, where we've been doing a wonderfully deep study of Joseph Campbell's immortal classic, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And we've done quite a bit of work already. We've made a lot of progress through the journey. We've tackled the first of the 3 major stages, the departure stage, or sometimes called the separation stage or phase, with its 5 substages: the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, the supernatural aid, the crossing of the first threshold, and then the belly of the whale. And we've worked our way through the second major phase of the monomyth cycle. That's that bottom half of the circle, called by Campbell the initiation stage. Some people call it the underworld. So with its 6 stages, right? The road of trials, the meeting with the goddess, woman as temptress. And then in our last video, video 4, we tackled those last 3 substages of the initiation phase: the atonement with the Father, that was a big one, and apotheosis, an even bigger one. And then that readied the hero for that, the attainment of the whole purpose of the quest, which was the ultimate boon. And frankly, a lot of hero stories end there. You know, once the hero gets the prize, well, it's like run the final credits. But as you know, we're only 2/3 of the way through. So we have that final third to think through, and that is the return, that last quarter hour on the clock of the hero's journey, getting back home. There's so much more to discover, so let's dig in. Now, this third phase, called the return, has 6 substages. Remember, there's 17 of these substages throughout the whole hero's journey. We still have 6 to go. They are the refusal of the return, the magic flight, rescue from without, crossing the return threshold, and then the final 2, master of 2 worlds and freedom to live. So let's start with the next substage. It's substage 12 for you, for those of you keeping score, keeping this on a 17 substage list. We're up to 12 now, the refusal of the return. And this is really a lot like the refusal of the call way back, substage 2, way back at the very, very beginning of our hero's journey. So let's start out with Campbell's words. I want to share with you the first paragraph in this chapter called The Refusal of the Return. Here's what Campbell says. When the hero quest has been accomplished through penetration to the source, or through the grace of some male or female, human or animal personification, the adventurer still must return with his or her life-transmuting trophy. The full round, the norm of the monomyth, requires that the hero shall now begin the labor of bringing the runes of wisdom, the golden fleece, or his sleeping princess back into the kingdom of humanity, where the boon may redound to the renewing of the community, the nation, the planet, or the 10,000 worlds. But the responsibility has been frequently refused. Even the Buddha, after his triumph, doubted whether the message of realization could be communicated. So this is a tricky part of the hero's journey where, having been through so much and now basking in the transcendent bliss of apotheosis with the boon in hand, in that kind of, divine transcendent bliss, why not stay right here, right? Why get back on the road? Why pack my things and go through whatever ordeals lay ahead? And that nagging doubt that I have seen so much, I have done so much, I have become so much. How am I going to translate this to my friends who've never left Plato's cave, who've never left the Shire, who've never left Kansas and been to Oz and back, and so on. All the stories, right? How am I going to communicate what I've seen and what I've come to know and what I've come to be back in my little town where I came from, back in the domestic sphere? So that's the kind of nagging, like, now what kind of energy around this substage 12, the refusal of the return. It's very natural to kind of hesitate here. But as with the refusal of the call, way back at the top of the cycle, to remain stuck here would be a failure. To remain stuck here would be ultimately selfish. You getting what you want and forgetting the larger mission. Remember, this isn't about you. The hero's journey is never about you. Our lives are not about just egoic self-fulfillment. It's always about service. How can we take the tools we have been given, the knowledge we have, the knowledge that has been revealed to us, and contribute to the healing of the world? Tikkun Olam in Hebrew, right? That great Jewish ethical imperative that is our purpose, or in Sanskrit, our dharma, to take whatever we are and whatever we have been given and wield those tools in the mission of the healing of the world. That's where our own bliss lay. And you only get to keep what you give away. That's the great spiritual paradox, right? So that's substage 12, the refusal of the return, the reluctance to leave the apotheosis bliss. So let's get to substage 13, the magic flight. This is the chase scene. There are so many movies, too many to name, that are just basically all this substage. You grab the prize and you run, and whoever used to have the prize that you stole it from, they're after you now. So that's the magic flight. And because in many of the classic hero stories, whether it's myths or fairy tales or whatever, the boon, the prize, had to be stolen. It had to be gained through some trickery. Prometheus goes to Mount Olympus and steals fire in the form of a burning coal. And Zeus told him not to do this, right? This is forbidden. He's taking fire from the upper world, but Prometheus loves humanity in Greek mythology. And so Prometheus hides a burning ember of a coal inside of an anise bulb, a fennel bulb. And he, puts it in his coat and he sneaks down the mountain and he gives it to humanity. And fire represents everything, right? It's the ability to heat your homes, to cook food, to keep away predators, to make iron and weapons and plows. I mean, fire is technology, fire is power. And Prometheus gives that to humanity. And he has to steal it, right? And Zeus is in a rage. So this is that flight from those who used to have the boon that you now stole so that you could give it away, so that you could give it to humanity. The gods you stole it from, they're after you, so you have to run. I'm thinking of heist movies. You know how we love movies like, I don't know, here's a dumb one, Point Break, or just all the gangster stuff. And how about Ocean's 11, right? Ripping off casinos. That Robin Hood kind of energy, the thief as hero. All the Mission Impossible movies, the ability to break into a super, super, super secret thing and take their code or their whatever, their weapon, and then stealing it's one thing, but now you got to get out through layer after layer after layer of impossible tasks. This can be the most dangerous substage, the magic flight. So a lot of fun to be had here in so many stories and heroes' journeys. And what often happens is the hero gets just about killed or exhausted or ground down into bone weariness, and they collapse. And now comes substage 14, the rescue from without. In other words, somebody from outside of this has got to come in and grab you and save you. So that's how a lot of the stories unfold. The chase is just too much. The flight or the entire quest that preceded it. Think of Frodo in Lord of the Rings. By the time he gets to the end, he's wrung out. I mean, there's hardly anything left. And so our hero at this stage is utterly depleted, and they collapse, exhausted or near death. I'm thinking of Frodo toward the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, in that final book or movie, The Return of the King, when his mission has been to destroy this magic ring, and him and his buddy Sam have made it into Mordor, and they've made it all the way to Mount Doom, the volcano where the ring was forged, where it's the only place you can destroy it. So they're going up the mountain, and it's so grim, and it's just fire. It's basically hell. And these little hobbits, who by nature are home-loving creatures, they're the last creature in all of Middle-earth you would send on an adventure. A very, very unlikely pair. They're 3 feet tall and they can't run that fast, and they don't have any magical powers. But if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, they have the whole fellowship around them, etc. But in this final moment, in this rescue from without moment, Frodo, whose mission it is to carry the ring, Sam can't carry it. He collapses, and he literally can't go on. And they're almost at the top of the mountain. And in this really beautiful scene in the film, Sam says to Frodo, his dear, dear friend, he says, "Frodo, I can't carry the ring, but I can carry you." I mean, I get chills just thinking about that scene. It's so beautiful. And Sam picks up Frodo and carries him the rest of the way. And then the ring goes into the volcano and it's destroyed, and then they're leaving, and then the volcano's blowing up, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and they're just on this little island of rock surrounded by lava. I mean, they're basically goners, right? They're never gonna get home. Here comes another rescue from without. Gandalf the wizard sends the eagles, giant eagles, and the eagles come in with that ethereal music playing, and there they both are, Sam and Frodo, just about dead, and the eagles grab them and literally fly them out. Talk about, a magic flight / rescue from without. I mean, that is just textbook stuff. So in our lives, since we aren't hobbits in Mordor in need of giant eagles, although that would be nice sometimes, but in our lives, how good are you and I at accepting help? Because that's really what this is, right? Rescue from without means that moment where you realize you aren't good enough, smart enough, strong enough. You don't have the tools to get this done. I mean, and the smart thing to do would be to surrender and let yourself be lifted by others, by powerful others who know the way, who have strengths that you do not have. Just say, you know what? I'm not handling my life very well right now. I'm going to make that call and schedule some therapy sessions. Or I'm sick of being addicted to drugs or alcohol. I'm going to go to an AA or an NA meeting. This is the rescue from without. To say, God, a little help. And that is a powerful moment. That humility is a kind of empowerment. It's a paradox. Again, the hero's journey is rife with paradox. You wouldn't think that surrendering and collapsing would be a moment of empowerment, that giving up and turning the reins over to something else or someone else would be empowerment, but it is. And this moment in the story teaches us that. That's that philosophical, spiritual teaching, that pedagogical teaching that comes out of this moment, for me anyway. That's how I'm seeing it. Now, Now that we've recognized how essential it is to allow yourself to be helped, to get to that deep humility, and where you just stop fighting and allow the universe itself sometimes to help you. Now it is time for the final 3 substages. The crossing of the return threshold, again, that's a parallel to the crossing of the first threshold that got us on the initiation stage. And now technically this is really returning to the upper world. So I want to look at a couple of passages from Campbell again on this business. I'm on page 186, if you have the same edition that I do. And this is actually the very last paragraph of the Rescue from Without chapter. And it sets up the crossing of the return threshold. Here's what Campbell says at the very end of that section on page 186. He says, "This brings us to the final crisis of the round, to which the whole miraculous excursion has been but a prelude. That, namely, of the paradoxical, supremely difficult threshold crossing of the hero's return from the mystic realm into the land of common day. Whether rescued from without, driven from within, or gently carried along by the guiding divinities, he has yet to re-enter with his boon the long-forgotten atmosphere where men who are fractions imagine themselves to be complete. He has yet to confront society with his ego-shattering, life-redeeming elixir and take the return blow of reasonable queries, hard resentment, and good people at a loss to comprehend. Going back to the land where men who are fractions imagine themselves whole." That's good stuff, Joe. He's quite the writer. And you're not going to be understood in this next section. And as I mentioned at the top of this video, that's going to be the challenge. Now, we are returning to the upper world, supposedly, right? If we conceptualize the under half of the circle, the initiation phase, as the underworld, now we're returning to the upper world. If you framed it that way, and it's a very reasonable way to frame it, look at what Campbell says at the beginning of the chapter called The Crossing of the Return Threshold. We're about to drop a bomb right here, or I should say Joe is about to drop a bomb. On page 188, he writes, "The 2 worlds, the divine and the human." So the divine would have been the lower where we met, the apotheosis, and the human where we came from. The 2 worlds, the divine and the human, can be pictured only as distinct from each other, different as life and death, as day and night. The hero adventures out of the land we know into darkness, there accomplishes his adventure, or again is simply lost to us, imprisoned or in danger, and his return is described as a coming back out of that yonder zone. Nevertheless, and here is a great key to the understanding of myth and symbol, the 2 kingdoms are actually one. The realm of the gods is a forgotten dimension of the world we know. And the exploration of that dimension, either willingly or unwillingly, is the whole sense of the deed of the hero. That's a big deal. That it was necessary for us up until now to depict the upper world and the lower world as being different. And you leave the human everyday world and go into that divine underworld to have all your transformative experiences and have everything burned away and to atone with the Father and to apotheosis, transcendent wisdom, and then the attainment of the boon. That all had to happen outside of the neighborhood. But then you come back to the neighborhood and his his shattering of the structural concept we've spent so much time building. That basically there aren't two worlds. In other words, he never really left home. And isn't that the message at the end of The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy's laying there in the bed, and it turns out she just got bonked in the head during the tornado, and this has all been a vision. And she never left home. And the meaning of that really is that this is it. This is all we get, is the here and now. So we can talk in sort of literary, poetic, or mythological terms about a going out and a return. But in the end, that structure itself must be abandoned and transcended. So the challenge here is going to be how to bring the boon home, how to translate the ineffable mystery that you've experienced into words people who've never left home will understand. Yeah, good luck. It kind of can't be done. You see Jesus struggle with this so much in the Gospels. He says, he says to his crew, his disciples, as you go around teaching, he says, don't cast your pearls before swine. And a prophet is never appreciated in his own land. He tells his disciples, say what you're going to say. And if nobody hears you, just wipe the dust off your feet and go to the next town. You can't make people understand something they are not receptive to. They are not ready to understand it. That's the challenge now the hero faces in these last few stages. Let me go back to the text, the bottom of page 188, in the Crossing the Return Threshold chapter. He says, how to teach, again, however, has been taught. What has been taught correctly and incorrectly learned 1,000 times. How to teach what has been taught 1 billion times already and still nobody understands it. How do you do that? Throughout the millennia of mankind's prudent folly, that is the hero's ultimate difficult task. How render back into light world language the speech-defined pronouncements of the dark? How represent on a two-dimensional surface a three-dimensional form? Or in a three-dimensional image, a multi-dimensional meaning? How translate into terms of yes and no revelations that shatter into meaninglessness every attempt to define the pairs of opposites? How communicate to people who insist on the exclusive evidence of their senses the message of the all-generating world or void? Yeah, you're trying to put the nameless, you're trying to give name to the nameless. And the ineffable cannot be spoken. It cannot be put into words. It can't even be put into concepts. And yet that's now the hero's task? Good luck. This is one of the hardest jobs so far on the hero's journey. This is extremely difficult and often leaves our hero in a deeply dissatisfied, even agitated state, right? Or certainly in a state of isolation and loneliness. You realize now that you just can't even talk about what you've seen and experienced. I think, I have the honor and the privilege as a professor at a community college in a military town in San Diego with a lot of returning combat veterans, Marines and Navy, mostly around here. And I've had such rich conversations and discussions with returning combat veterans. And in private, they tell me how brutally challenging it is to come back to the world that can't even find Afghanistan on a map. That doesn't even know that we're in a war in Afghanistan, the longest running war in American history. A war they were just in 12 hours ago, and now they're here, sitting in my classroom, surrounded by wonderful people who have no idea what this Marine or soldier or sailor or airman, this woman, this man who's held their dying friends in their arms after an IED explosion took out their Humvee on a road in a town none of us have ever heard of. That just really haunts me when I feel then in conversation with these amazing people that how difficult it is to come back home. You think coming home would be great, but there's a disconnect that is going to be very difficult to bridge. And in a very real way, you can't go home again, ever. Because you're not who you were and you never will be. And I think of, again, bouncing back to the world of fiction, I think of Frodo at the end of The Lord of the Rings. He can't go home again. He goes back to the Shire with Sam and Merry and Pippin, and they're back in their beautiful little hobbit world, and the world is saved. The boon was received, the boon being the destruction of the ring and the saving the world from this evil monster, this terrible demonic ruler. And so the world, he saved the world, right? But he didn't save the world for himself. And this is Tolkien's Christian symbolism coming in very heavily for J.R.R. Tolkien, an Oxford Don, friend of C.S. Lewis, right? They're both Christians. And there's Christian iconography and symbolism and metaphor packed all through Lord of the Rings. And Frodo is a Christ-like figure who saves the world, but not for himself. And in the end, he must ride off into the sea with the elves. He doesn't get to have that domestic bliss that we're going to get to in the next two stages, like Sam does. Frodo gave all, and he lost his life in a sense. And that's often a key haunting theme of so many heroes' journeys, right? The hero does not get to live in the world that they save. And it breaks our heart. So it makes us, I hope, appreciate more what we have been given by the heroes who fight for us, who have sacrificed so much for us, that we get to be safe and live in an abundant world, relatively safe, and luxuriate in the consciousness of gratitude, hopefully. So for the hero at this stage, the world, the ordinary world, is just a little too small. It's a little too trivial. It's even caustic, run by broken people in love with pettiness and with all their human foibles and flaws. And compared to the beautiful things you've seen, home is a little bit messed up. That's an uneasiness at this stage of the crossing of the return threshold. It's jarring. So we need to fix that. And that's what the last two stages are. If you're going to stay in this world now, something has to change. Frodo did not stay in this world. He had to go away. But if the hero is going to come home to this world, a couple things have to happen. And that's what these last two stages are about, the master of two worlds and freedom to live. So you have to, let's get to the 16, the penultimate substage, the second to the last substage, the master of two worlds. Here, the hero must and does make peace with the ordinary world, even though you've been to the realm of the gods. So you've got 1 foot in eternity and 1 foot in temporality. That's what Campbell means by master of two worlds. You don't have to get rid of one and live fully in the other, or stay in the old one and not go to the new. You are in both places. 1 foot in eternity, 1 foot in temporality or time, 1 foot in the formlessness, 1 foot in the world of form, 1 foot in wholeness and integration, 1 foot in fragmentation. So you can be in the world but not of it, as the Gospels say. And again, for Christians, Jesus represents this of two worlds thing, the master of two worlds, fully divine, and yet right down here in the dirt with us, in fact, washing our feet, breaking bread with us. This is the Bodhisattva also of the Buddhist tradition. Bodhi meaning illumination, and sattva meaning being, sat, being. The Bodhisattva And like the Buddha is a bodhisattva. There's one sitting right over my shoulder there, little tiny Buddha. That is a bodhisattva. And in Mahayana Buddhism, there are scores and scores of these bodhisattva figures. And the bodhisattva is the master of two worlds. They have attained nirvana or enlightenment, and yet they choose of their own volition to stay here in the world of embodied forms, to work for the alleviation of the suffering of all creatures. That's the mastery of two worlds. That's the Bodhisattva world. Again, Jesus plays that role for a while in Christianity, the divine made material, and the dying God motif in many mythological traditions, and the Bodhisattva tradition as well. And again, the deeper wisdom here is that you're not stuck in one world longing for the other. You're in both. And that, as we just read in Campbell's beautiful passage, ultimately the two world structure dissolves. And there's only one world, and you're in it. And this is the holy place, here and now. There's no place like home. There's no place like home, Dorothy says. I'm never going to leave again. She comes back. She's in love with the world. Look at George Bailey, the Jimmy Stewart character in the Frank Capra classic film, It's a Wonderful Life. After his whole ordeal, he comes back. Remember that last scene where he's running down the street of Bedford Falls, his beloved little backwater town that used to bore him to tears, but now he's just in love with everything. He's like, hello, theater, hello, pharmacy. So he's kissing the taxi cab driver. He goes back to his dumpy little house with the leaky, drafty windows that he used to just complain about. Now he's like, now it's a gilded palace, the broken banister. He kisses it, he puts it back on the stair. His beautiful wife is amazing, miraculous children, their little Christmas tree, and he is in bliss now, that Sat Chit Ananda, boundless being, boundless consciousness, boundless bliss. He's come home and he's the master of two worlds now. Now he appreciates where he is. It's as if he is the embodiment of that beautiful Navajo prayer. And I'm really jumping around between traditions and films and books and religions and stuff, but that's what this stuff makes me do. It makes me see all the interconnections between all these human expressions. So in this beautiful Navajo prayer that some of you know, again, corn pollen is the sacred substance of the Navajo. So like holy water for Catholics. So the prayer goes, beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty to the right of me, beauty to the left of me, beauty above me, beauty below me. I walk the pollen path. That wherever you are always in the sacred center. This is the Holy Crux, where the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit meet in the oneness of the divine here and now, the holy now, the eternal presence. This is the treasure you seek. Samsara is nirvana. That's the final realization of Buddhism. Buddhism is like, well, you've got to get out of samsara and get to nirvana. Samsara is the world of impermanent forms and rebirth and death and rebirth and death and suffering. And you've got to leave that and get to nirvana. But the final realization is samsara and nirvana are one thing. Like Campbell said, there's just this one reality, and it's all holy because we have gone beyond the duality of all the pairs of opposites. And finally, the 17th stage, which is really just a quality of the 16th stage, and that is the freedom to live. So in other words, in this expanded stance of wisdom, of the mastery of the ability to be in both worlds, and the unification really of both worlds, now in this awareness, the hero is free. free from fear, specifically free from the fear of death, fully alive and present in this now moment. That's what Campbell means by the freedom to live. Not stuck in regrets about the past, in cycles of shame and self-loathing, nor caught by pathological cravings for what the future must provide me, but instead, no future, no past, just the holy now. And the realization that this is it. This is it. If you don't get it here, Campbell says, you're not going to get it anywhere. And so you can stop looking now. You can stop running around now. But to me, one of the delicious ironies of this hero's journey monomyth cycle is that you can't have this realization until you've been through the whole cycle. It's kind of funny. You're like, man, I could have saved a lot of time just by staying home and like reading the right book or whatever, watching the right YouTube video, and then I would have figured all this out. But apparently it doesn't work that way. You have to go through the struggle. You have to go through the ordeal. Isn't that what the teaching is of the hero's journey? That only when you face your fear and go through the ordeals do you come to the realization of the depth, sweetness of your ordinary life. This is the kingdom of heaven. This is Sat Chit Ananda, boundless being, boundless consciousness or awareness, and boundless bliss. That is what we are. But that realization is buried under layers and layers of the onion, if you will. And all those layers have to be peeled away in order to get down to the essential nature that we always were and that we are right now. So now, let us pray. Let us sing. Let us dance. And let us write. And let us paint and write poetry, and let us create and make films and build homes and create businesses that serve the needs of humanity and life and the planet. Let's participate and let's eat and play and love in this beautiful world that we have been given. Knowing now that there is nothing to seek, that we have not already ourselves in the ancient days become. We were born into this holiness, and it is enough. And we are enough.